Zelda wouldn't be Zelda without combat. Sure, you can make a Zelda-like that doesn't include combat, but when I play a Zelda-like that doesn't include this critical pillar, I can tell and feel that it is missing something crucial. In today's devlog, I will be talking about the enemy system in my own Zelda-like that I'm developing with Godot. In the very first devlog for my Zelda-like game, I showed off sort of this giant dirt square that has served as my testing area for the entirety of development so far. It's gotten pretty out of hand with me just placing a bunch of chests and transition areas and spike trap throughout the level, so I think it's time for a change. To make a better testing area, I grabbed this prison library dungeon tile set off of itch, and it's fantastic. It has everything that I could possibly need for making this testing area. It will be linked in the description along with any other resources that I use for this video. And speaking of that, another thing that really helped me with building out this testing area that you're going to see is the tile video of all time by Bucket Brigade. I'll link that video in the description. It goes through a whole bunch of the tile map features and how to set it up in Godot. I'm sure eventually it will become muscle memory for me, but I just continuously reference that video when I'm setting up my tile maps. Anyway, you can see in this speed painting of the test area that while it's not terribly exciting, it's definitely a step above having a giant dirt map. This is also a great segue into the next section of this devlog, which is dungeon items. I mentioned that combat is a critical pillar of Zelda-likes, and I believe that dungeons and subsequently dungeon items is another critical pillar. Dungeon items include things like the keys, the map, and the compass. Yeah, I'm not gonna have a compass in mind. It never really made a lot of sense to me that a compass would point you to every chest in the dungeon. So instead, I'm going to have a journal that some other explorer who died in the dungeon left behind, and that journal will keep a whole bunch of notes in it about where chests and other secrets in the dungeon might be found. I think that's a little more interesting way to do it. Yeah, it's not perfect, but I think it makes a little more sense than a compass telling you where all of the chests are. The map and journal don't work right now, and I honestly have no idea how I'm going to get those things working, especially in a modular way that doesn't involve a whole lot of extra work. That's going to take some doing on my part. So right now they don't do anything. You can technically get them in the game because of how modular items are. So there is a way for you to just grab them from a chest, but they won't do anything except add themselves to your inventory. However, the key is something that I can make start working right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to that. If you recall from my previous devlog, I got doors working, specifically transition areas where you walk through one transition area and it would connect you to the linked transition area from that door. This allowed me to very easily create linked doors from different areas and different levels, and you could just move between them automatically. It was very straightforward. I removed the previous sprites that I had on it and replaced them with the door sprites from the prison and library dungeon tile set, and used those to signify north, south, east, and west doors. And then I have things where I can toggle the direction that the door is facing in the door settings now, and I can toggle whether or not the door is locked. This will also transfer the data about whether or not this door is locked to its sister door. That way, if this door is locked, its sister door is also locked, so that no matter which angle you approach the door from, that door is locked. And the same goes for it being unlocked. That way, if you unlock a door on this side and then you go to the other side of the door, it's not also locked on that side because I didn't make some sort of extra checkbox or something. So I just have to do a quick test. I add a key to my inventory by grabbing it out of this chest, and then I go and unlock the first door that leads to the Destructibles test room that I added to my testing area, and I can walk through once I unlock the door. So keys and locked doors are working. And now the moment you've been waiting for in this devlog that I teased from the very start, the enemy. I've really not been looking forward to making this because I know that creating an enemy requires iteration upon iteration upon iteration to get right. And that's not as fun as it might sound at first, especially for non-developers, because it requires so much testing to tweak each of the numbers to get them exactly how you want them, let alone once I start doing things like adding difficulty settings. So every single aspect of the enemy, once you just do the initial setup of it, just has to keep being slightly tweaked and modified to get the enemy to work exactly as you want. Basically what I'm saying is that AI is complicated, not Gen AI. Of course, there's nothing complicated about plagiarism and theft and lying to the public and your shareholders and just kind of continuing to expand the bubble until it pops. That's actually pretty straightforward to do. I'm talking specifically about enemy AI that is programmed by a person. The good news is that if I do this correctly in the way that I'm intending, I only have to do it once. And once I get it right the first time, I just have to tweak and modify some exposed variables for future enemies. That's the goal. The goal is to do this one time, have it work, and then I can just make any enemy that I want to with this single system, except maybe some individual enemies who might have special behaviors, or perhaps some bosses may require additional tweaking that can't happen with just exposed variables. That's because enemies, like everything else in my game, need to be modular. They're going to be made up of 3 primary components: their animations, their attacks, and their behaviors. Attacks are things that they're going to call when they interact with the player. Behaviors are how they interact with the player, like how quickly am I going to chase the player, when do I start chasing the player, when do I stop chasing the player because they've gotten too far away, how often do I use X or Y attack. All of those are behaviors that are going to be modular. And then animations is another one that I want to be something modular that I don't have to individually interact with. I'd like to be able to have the animations be a simple exposed variable, and I do set that up toward the end of this section, so stay tuned for that. So an enemy is going to be a single entity with attacks, animations, and behaviors all exposed with Godot's handy resources, which I have really fallen in love with over the course of development. I have so many resource classes, it's insane, and I've only just gotten started. Now, animations and attacks are pretty easy to get going. It's the behaviors that are the challenging part and that required so much testing. I don't even know how many hours or even days I spent testing this. According to the videos, it was a couple of days, and I had to really cut up the different iterations that you see here, but every single time I tested, something was wrong, or fixing one thing would break another, and I had to keep doing this over and over and over again. And to be honest with you, no matter what I did, nothing really ever felt perfect. By the end of it, I really just kind of felt like, okay, I have an enemy who works right now. There are still some slight modifications I would like to make, but this is a good stopping point, and I can tweak it as I go on, and I want to make the enemy a little bit smarter and behave a little bit better. Right now, the enemy is challenging, and to me, that's the point that I think is a good stopping place. Here's basically how the enemy works. It has a roaming or an idle state. In idle, it will just kind of stand where it is and maybe rotate its facing direction. In roaming, it will move all around within a set distance from its starting point. And then if the player enters its player detection zone, which is this diamond shape in front of the enemy and then a circle radius that is around the enemy, if the player enters that zone, the enemy will begin chasing the player. And then if the player is a good enough distance away from that chase zone, the enemy will stop chasing the player and go back to its previous state of either idling or roaming around. So, I eventually got that into a place that I was content with. I don't want to say happy, but I'm content with where the enemy is. Finally, I added an automatic slicer essentially for the enemy sprite sheet, where it will just automatically cut up enemy sprite sheets and add directional tags at the end of each of the animation names. So I can just say, this is the animation walk, and it's row 0, and then it will cut up rows 0, 1, 2, and 3, and it will use animation walk, and then it will add underscore, up, down, left, right, etc. To the end of that animation. And I can do that with 8 directions as well. This whole plugin was really simple. It's very straightforward. I think it's a few lines of code, but it is a huge lifesaver for me and will save a ton of time in the future. Okay. Now that I have an enemy who's okay and can shoot projectiles at me and reduce my hit points, I think it's time for the player to have something in their repertoire that is not just swinging a sword. I'm going to let the player use a shield and block. Now, I don't think my player eventually is going to have a shield. They're going to have different ways to block attacks, but at the moment, a shield is what is available in the sprite, so they're going to be pulling out a shield. So I went into the player, I set up the 4 directional animations for the shield holding, and I added inputs for that, and then I also created colliders for each facing direction, so that it's not just you're immune to damage or you're immune to damage when you're facing this direction. It also matters if the attack kind of hits around where your shield is. So you can still get hit by damage if it bypasses the shield collider entirely. It's unlikely, but theoretically possible. I just felt like that would add a little bit more realism to the game. All of this is going to have to change eventually, I know, once I actually add the real blocking mechanics in my game, but for the moment, this was what feels good. This was really simple to set up. It just prevents damage to the player from the direction that they're facing, and I already pull facing directions and things, so it's just, am I facing this direction? Which direction is the attack coming from? Which is data that's already sent when you take damage. So really straightforward to set up, and it's working. The player can block incoming damage. Perfect. It does consume 1 point of energy, so you can't block indefinitely. Blocking also reduces the amount of knockback that you experience. So there's all sorts of fun mechanics that I kind of added into this, and it's just good to have it set up, and it makes combat feel a lot livelier already. And now we can easily take down our enemy. Of course, the player can't die when they're reduced to 0 hit points, so we do have a really unfair advantage, but I think player death is something to tackle next time. Now, I got a little bit or a lot sidetracked after all of that because combat and enemy AI really took a whole lot out of me, and I wanted something that was more predictable and simple simple to tackle. Even though save and load and all of that is complicated, I know it just felt more predictable and required so much less bug testing than enemy AI. Not even bug testing, just feel-good testing. That's going to come to me revealing what the title of the game is. I have at least tentatively entitled the game The Epic of Sogard. I will get to more of why I entitled the game this later on as I unveil more of the story that I'm envisioning, but I'm really excited about this. I think that it both captures the Legend of Zelda feel and title scheme so that you kind of know what you're getting into from the very start, while also kind of giving you that gothic feel that I want you to have, because this is going to be a more gothic Zelda-like. That's the title of the game, The Epic of Sogard. I will probably have a better title screen in the future. I'm still workshopping exactly what I want it to look like and everything, but for right now, I've put up a small splash screen inside of the game, had it animate with some basic text prompts that play title, moving animations, and all of that, and then created the file system. File system has 6 file slots, and each of those will display information pulled from the save file associated with that file slot. So you can see the playtime, you can see the location the player last saved in, as well as their resources, upgrades, how far they've progressed into the game, that sort of thing. The essential Zelda things, right? When you look at somebody's file in a Zelda game, you can usually see how many hearts they have, for example. So all of that is here in the file system. I got all of that working, and it felt really good to have that functioning already. So I got that working. You can go in, you can click on your file, and it loads the game with everything that you last had. And let's go ahead and just load into our game and go fight the enemies. What is... Oh, good Lord, I really don't want to touch this AI anymore. Please. I'm so tired. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one, where hopefully the enemies will work a little bit better. Say bye, Ellie. Say bye. Bye.